The day of my ex-wife's funeral, her son, my own son, stood up in front of 200 mourners and called me a disgrace. My hands shook, but I didn't leave. I stayed. Because honor isn't about comfort. It's about facing the fire, even when it burns you alive. And what came next changed everything. You won't believe what I did after this. Before we go on, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I stood under the brass letters, Harrison and Cole, attorneys at law, long enough for the doorman to decide I was lost. I wasn't. I knew exactly where I was and exactly what everyone inside thought of me. The ex-husband, the footnote, the man who didn't belong. Mr. Walker? The receptionist's smile was professional, the kind that keeps people moving. Conference room 3. They're waiting. They were, and not patiently. Ethan was the first thing I saw when the door opened. Expensive suit, expensive watch, no warmth. He didn't meet me halfway. He never does. His eyes slid over me like I was a maintenance issue, not a man. "You shouldn't have come," he said, voice low, meant for me and the oak table and no one else. "Mom wouldn't want it." "Your mother's not here to want anything," I said, flat, clean cut, no tremor. Across the table, Mr. Harrison stacked documents with a surgeon's calm. "Shall we begin? Time is not our friend today." He gestured to the head of the table. I didn't take it. I sat near the door. Old habit. Leave a room fast if you have to. The blinds were half closed, letting in winter light that made everyone look a little older. A clock ticked, loud enough to be a metronome for grief. Harrison slid non-disclosure forms across the table. I signed. Ethan scrawled his signature like he was stabbing the page. "This reading concerns the last will and testament of Clara Monroe Walker," Harrison said, voice smooth, measured. "Executed 4 months ago, updated once, witnessed twice." He looked at Ethan first, then me, letting the pause do the work. He had the tone of a man about to land a plane in a crosswind. Ethan leaned back, a small smile forming, the one that always says, "I'm winning." My son learned early that silence can humiliate more efficiently than shouting. He was humming now. Harrison began with formalities, dates, codicils, inventory schedules. My heart beat steady. I'd had 15 years of practice staying calm while the floor moved. Then came the first turn. "To my son, Ethan James Walker," Harrison read, "I leave the property at Crestwood Heights and a cash inheritance of $600,000, dispersed after probate." Ethan didn't blink. He smirked. A victory lap without moving. He turned, just enough for me to catch the half-grin. "And," Harrison continued, "subject to conditions enumerated in Schedule D." The smirk clipped. "Conditions?" Ethan said. "We'll address schedules after," Harrison said, almost kindly. Then his tone hardened, like steel set in plaster. "To my former husband, David Walker." Silence pressed against the glass. "I bequeath controlling interest, 65%, in Walker Dynamics Incorporated, together with my personal investment accounts totaling $32 million. No one exhaled, not for a full second. Then the room broke. Ethan's chair scraped back so hard it bit the floor. "No, absolutely not." Harrison didn't flinch. "There's more." "There can't be," Ethan snapped. He's nothing to this company. He's nothing to her legacy." Harrison lifted a hand without looking up. "To be clear, Ms. Walker executed this will in sound mind. Independent evaluation, clean report. I have certifications on record." He tapped the folder. Calm, methodical, unshakable. I stared at the edge of the table, the tiny seam where 2 slabs of wood met. My name still rang in the air like a bell that didn't know when to stop. "Read it again," Ethan demanded. "Read it slowly." Harrison did, word for word, no mercy and clarity. Ethan went red, then pale, then something fragile that looked almost like fear. "You think I'm going to let this stand?" he said to me, not the lawyer. "You think you can walk in here and take everything? You left, remember? You walked away from all of it." I didn't remind him that I'd walked away from noise, not from him. I didn't remind him that I'd begged for balance. None of that matters in front of money. Money changes the frequency in a room. It makes memory selective. "Mr. Walker," Harrison said, meaning me now, "there are governance documents in the second envelope, including immediate interim measures. You are named acting chair until a full board meeting can be convened. Security protocols are in place. We will escort you to the elevator when we finish." "Security?" Ethan barked. "For him?" "For everyone," Harrison said. "Your mother anticipated disagreement." That was twist two. Clara anticipating the storm and boarding the windows. Ethan laughed, sharp, empty. "You think she wrote that sober? She must have been scared, manipulated. He got to her." "I hadn't been in the same room with your mother in 15 years, I said. No anger, just fact. "Exactly," he shot back. "So why would she choose you? Why now?" Harrison slid a thin, sealed envelope onto the table. Clara's looping handwriting cut through me in one pass. "Private. David." His hand hovered, then moved it away from my reach. "This is to be opened after the formal reading," he said. "Alone." Twist 3. Clara's voice waiting in paper. My pulse finally stumbled. Ethan shoved both hands into his pockets and paced to the window. "I will contest this," he said to the glass. "Mental incompetence, undue influence, anything." "You can file," Harrison said, "but you'll lose." Not a threat. A weather report. The clock ticked. The blinds buzzed faintly where heat met cold. Outside, a siren wailed and faded. Inside, none of us moved. "Let's be clear about what happens next," Harrison said, stacking the pages, face unreadable. "Mr. Walker assumes voting control pending board ratification. Estate Council will coordinate transition. Ethan, you retain Crestwood Heights and the liquid bequest subject to schedule compliance. There is no pause button." Ethan turned, eyes burning. The boy he'd been flickered once, 15 and uncertain by a swimming pool, then vanished. "You're proud of this, aren't you?" he said to me. "You finally got to win." I shook my head. "No one wins here," I said. It was true, and somehow that made it worse. Harrison closed the folder with a soft click that sounded like a verdict. "We're done for today. David, wait in the adjoining office. Ethan, you may leave through reception or remain with counsel." I stood. My knees didn't buckle, which felt like its own small miracle. As I reached the door, Ethan's voice cut the room one last time. "She chose power her whole life," he said. "And in the end, she chose weakness." I turned. "In the end," I said, "she chose." I stepped into the hallway. The door shut behind me, and the building hummed the way buildings do when no one is listening. I stared at the envelope in Harrison's hand through the glass pane. It looked weightless. It wasn't. Everyone thought that was the end of the story. It wasn't. It was the hinge. And hinges, once they swing, don't swing back. I met Clara in the middle of a storm. Not rain, but the kind that brews inside people and explodes in words. It was February 1986, snow cutting sideways down Main Street, when I ducked into Louie's diner for warmth. She was already there, tearing the manager apart with a voice that didn't need to shout. "You're telling me no women in management because they can't handle pressure? Pathetic. The whole diner tilted toward her. I froze, half a forkful of cherry pie suspended. She dropped a business card on the counter like it was a grenade and left. Red scarf trailing, boots biting the snow. That was Clara. A storm disguised as a woman. 3 days later, I called the number on that card. My hands shook. She answered on the second ring. Clara Monroe. Crisp, sharp. "This is David Walker. I was at Louie's." "You're the guy with the pie," she cut in. Then she laughed. Not polite laughter. Real, sharp, unforgettable. By the end of the week, we had dinner. By the end of the year, we were married. We built a life with scraps and stubbornness. I worked 12-hour shifts at the plant. She built a consulting firm at our kitchen table. The air smelled of burnt coffee and ambition. Still, there was joy. Cheap pizza on Fridays. VHS tapes rented for $1, her head resting against me as credits rolled. When Ethan came, red-faced and screaming, our world rearranged itself. At first, we were still a team. I rocked him to sleep. She typed proposals at 2 a.m. Our tiny apartment overflowed with noise and hope. But Clara's fire didn't flicker. It roared. Clients multiplied. Money flowed. She spoke new languages. Market share. Equity positions. I couldn't keep up, but I told myself it didn't matter. She was building the future. I was keeping us steady. Then came the first crack. She bought a computer for Ethan when he was 7. "This is the future," she said, already teaching him code. I suggested a fishing trip. She laughed at the idea of wasting time on water and worms. To her, the world was circuits and contracts. To me, it was family dinners. The second crack came at a dinner party after we'd moved into Crestwood Heights. Surrounded by investors, one of them asked what I did. Before I could answer, Clara said, "David works at the power plant. He keeps us grounded." The words sounded kind, but the tone was surgical, slicing me down to size. They laughed politely, and conversation flowed back to stocks. I sat there tasting humiliation with every sip of wine. By the time Ethan was 12, he was Clara's shadow. Coding, networking, sneering at my old pickup. When I suggested camping, he rolled his eyes. My son was disappearing into her world, and every time I reached for him, he slipped further away. Love didn't collapse in one night. It eroded, like smoke fading until you realize the fire is gone. We were sprinting in opposite directions. I was out of breath. She was just getting started. Looking back, the transformation wasn't sudden. It was a series of choices, hers, mine, ours, that pushed us further apart. And every time I tried to hold on, the rope burned my hands. What I didn't know then was how far we still had to fall, and how much it would cost when we hit the ground. The beginning of the end came disguised as a celebration. Ethan's 15th birthday was supposed to be simple. Balloons, friends from school, maybe a barbecue. That's what I wanted. The kind of night he'd remember because of laughter, not logistics. But when I walked through the front door after work, the house looked like a corporate gala. Crystal glasses lined up, waitstaff arranging platters, music so refined it didn't belong to kids at all. Clara stood in the center, directing everything like a general preparing for battle. "This isn't a birthday," I said, staring at the floral centerpieces. "It's a board meeting with cake." Clara didn't blink. "He's 15, David. These connections will shape his future." "What about just being a kid?" She turned slowly, her eyes cold enough to cut. "Being a kid is a luxury we can't afford." The words lodged like splinters. That night, Ethan smiled, shook hands with executives, and accepted gifts worth more than my car. But I saw him by the pool once, standing alone, shoulders slumped like the suit he wore was 2 sizes too heavy. "You all right, son?" I asked. He straightened immediately, mask back in place. "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" And just like that, the boy disappeared. The distance grew sharper after that night. Clara climbed higher into her empire. Ethan followed her shadow like it was the only safe place to stand. I tried to hold ground. I tried to remind them of fishing trips, Friday pizza nights, the things that used to matter. But each attempt felt smaller, weaker, irrelevant. The second crack came during a late dinner. Clara arrived home at midnight, briefcase still warm from meetings. I had saved her a plate. She barely glanced at it. "Ethan's already asleep," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "You missed his game. He pitched 3 innings. She didn't even look up from her phone. "This business pays for his future, David. You think baseball games will?" I pushed back harder than usual. "No, but maybe having his mother in the stands will." For the first time, she froze. Then she looked at me with eyes that no longer held love, only calculation. "Don't you dare lecture me about priorities." That was the night I realized she'd stopped being my partner. She wasn't building a life with me anymore. She was building a kingdom, and I was just one of the bricks. Ethan changed with her. By 17, he no longer spoke to me like a son. He spoke like a consultant rehearsing a pitch. "You settled for mediocrity, Dad. Mom built something extraordinary. And you just clock in, clock out. You don't understand ambition." The words cut deep, but what hurt worse was the certainty in his voice. He didn't see me as his father anymore. He saw me as a warning sign of what not to become. The final blow landed during his high school graduation. I sat alone in the bleachers, saving a seat for Clara that remained empty. I watched Ethan cross the stage, his eyes scanning the crowd for her. When he didn't find her, his jaw tightened, but he didn't look toward me. Not once. That night, Clara walked in at 1 a.m., still in her business suit, phone glowing in her hand. I'd been waiting. "This is it, Clara," I said. "Family has to come first sometimes. You can't keep missing everything." She didn't even pause. "Everything we have is because of me. Do you think your paycheck buys Crestwood Heights? Do you think it pays for Ethan's future? What about what it cost us?" My voice cracked, and I didn't care. "What about the dinners we never had? The trips we never took? The marriage we're losing piece by piece?" She looked up then, and what I saw in her eyes was final. No softness, no hesitation, just the truth she'd carried for years. "We're not a family anymore, David. We're a business arrangement, and it's not working." 6 months later, the papers were signed. Her lawyers carved me out of her empire with surgical precision. She kept the company, the house, the money. Ethan stayed with her, loyal to the world she'd promised him. I was left with a modest settlement and a house that felt like a tomb of old laughter. Ethan came by once or twice, but his visits were colder than Clara's lawyers. Every word he spoke carried judgment. Every glance reminded me I was no longer father, just failure. One night, after he left, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the dent his toy truck had made in the wood years ago. Back then, he'd cried because he thought he'd ruined it. I'd told him, "It just means this table belongs to us now." Now, even the table felt like a lie. For 15 years, I lived like a ghost. A steady job, a small apartment, coffee mugs stained from use. No parties, no empire, no sun, just silence. And I would have stayed in that silence forever, until the phone rang one gray morning and told me Clara was gone. The morning of Clara's funeral smelled like rain, though the sky stayed gray and dry. I wore the only suit I owned, pressed twice, still wrinkled at the cuffs. My tie didn't match. My shoes had more scuffs than shine. Driving the 15-year-old Honda up Crestwood Hill felt like dragging a rusted anchor through a sea of polished steel. Everywhere I looked, BMWs, Teslas, Cadillacs gleaming like they were born to sit in that circular drive. My car coughed, backfired once, and the valet hesitated before taking the keys. Inside the chapel, money whispered from every detail. Mahogany pews polished to a mirror shine, flowers arranged like sculptures, stained glass glowing with calculated reverence. 200 mourners filled the place. Executives, investors, politicians. Clara's empire gathered to mourn their queen, or at least to be seen doing it. I slipped into the back row, hoping to dissolve into the shadows. For a moment, I thought it might work. Then Ethan saw me. He was in the front, tall, sharp, carved in her image. Perfect suit, perfect hair, every inch the successor. His eyes locked on me, and in that instant, the chapel belonged to him. He started down the aisle, each step fueled by outrage. Conversations died. Heads turned. "What are you doing here?" His voice wasn't private. It was a blade thrown across the room. I stood, because staying seated felt like cowardice. I came to pay my respects. "You lost that right the day you walked out," he snapped. He was close now. Too close. The smell of expensive cologne cutting through the flowers. "I didn't walk out on her," I said quietly. "I walked out on the war." He laughed once, bitter and sharp, loud enough to reach the rafters. "You want sympathy? From them?" He turned to the crowd, his arm cutting the air toward me. "Do you know who this man is? He's the one who kept Clara down. While she was building an empire, he was punching a clock, dragging her backward. He never supported her. Not once." A ripple moved through the pews, murmurs, nods, judgment falling like stones. I saw faces I knew, neighbors who used to wave, people I once called friends. None met my eyes now. "She deserved better than him," Ethan continued, his voice swelling. "And now he dares show up here, pretending to grieve?" I felt the heat crawl up my neck, the sting of 200 stares. The old instinct said, "Leave, spare yourself." But I looked at Clara's photo at the altar, her smile caught forever in a frame, and I stayed rooted. "I'm not here for a show," I said. My voice was steady, louder now. "I'm here because she was my wife once, and because for a long time we loved each other. That doesn't vanish just because it ended badly." Gasps, disbelief, even pity from some corners. But I didn't sit down. Not yet. Ethan's jaw tightened, rage spilling through the cracks of his composure. "You embarrassed her when she was alive. You won't do it now." "I won't speak again," I told him. "I'll sit in the back, silent, but I won't leave." For the first time he faltered. He hadn't expected resistance. His eyes flickered, then hardened again. "You don't belong here," he hissed, but the words lacked the same weight. A funeral director stepped forward then, voice polished with diplomacy. "We'll begin in 5 minutes. Please, everyone, take your seats." The crowd settled reluctantly, the whispers still buzzing like angry wasps. Ethan gave me one last look, pure contempt, before returning to the front pew. I sank back down, my hands shaking in my lap. The service began. Voices rose to praise Clara's brilliance, her leadership, her unstoppable will. They spoke of her as a visionary, a titan. No one spoke of her laugh, or the way she hummed when she cooked, or the stubborn crease in her brow when she read contracts. The woman I had loved had been replaced with a monument, polished and towering. When the choir sang, I kept my eyes closed. When the pastor spoke of legacy, I held my breath. And when the final hymn faded, I stayed seated until nearly everyone had filed out. I thought I was free to slip away, unnoticed. But as I reached for my jacket, a hand tapped my shoulder. "Mr. Walker." I turned. A man in an immaculate suit, briefcase in hand, eyes sharp behind thin glasses. He introduced himself as Daniel Harrison. "I represent Clara's estate," he said. "We need you to come to the office for the reading of the will. She specifically requested your presence." Behind him, I saw Ethan at the far end of the aisle, surrounded by mourners. He wasn't smiling now. He was staring at me with disbelief, anger, maybe even fear. And in that instant, I knew the funeral was not the battlefield. The real war hadn't started yet. It was waiting in that law office, sealed inside Clara's final words. The air inside Harrison's office was too still, like the room itself was waiting to witness a fight. Dark wood, leather chairs, shelves heavy with law books. Ethan sat across from me in a suit that fit too perfectly, eyes locked on mine, daring me to breathe wrong. Harrison adjusted his glasses, opened the folder, and began. "This is the last will and testament of Clara Monroe Walker." His voice was calm, practiced, merciless. "To my son, Ethan James Walker," he read, "I leave the estate at Crestwood Heights and the sum of $600,000. Ethan smirked, a quiet, cruel victory. But Harrison didn't stop. "Subject to conditions in Schedule D." The smirk vanished. "Conditions?" he snapped. "We'll come back to that," Harrison said smoothly. Then his tone hardened. "To my former husband, David Walker." The room froze. My name hung like thunder. "I leave controlling interest in Walker Dynamics Incorporated, 65% ownership, and my personal investment accounts totaling $32 million. Silence. Not a breath. Then Ethan's chair screeched across the floor. "No, absolutely not." His voice cracked. "This is fraud." "It isn't," Harrison said firmly. "Your mother executed this will in full competence. Verified. Certified." Ethan turned on me, wild. "You think you can walk in after 15 years and take everything? You left. You abandoned us." I didn't move, didn't answer. The air itself was shaking with his rage. "There's more," Harrison said, sliding an envelope across the table. Clara's handwriting. Private. David. Ethan lunged, but Harrison blocked him. "This is for him," the lawyer said. I took the letter with trembling hands. Harrison unfolded it and began to read aloud. "My dearest David, if you are hearing this, I'm gone. You never wanted power. That's why I trust you with it. I loved you. Even when I chose ambition, I never stopped. This is my apology, my atonement. Use it for good, not for pride." Tears blurred the ink. My chest felt like it was collapsing. Harrison read on. "Ethan, my brilliant son, you're furious, I know. But this is not betrayal. This is protection. You must learn to stand on your own, to forgive your father for being human. I love you, but love without truth destroys." The room pulsed with silence. Ethan's face went pale, then red, then hollow. He whispered, She wouldn't say that." But she had. Her voice filled the room even though she was gone. "This isn't over," Ethan said finally, shaking. "I'll contest it. I'll burn it all down." I looked at him, saw not the polished man, but the boy still standing alone at his 15th birthday party, lost in a suit 2 sizes too big. "You can fight it," I said softly, "but it won't change her choice." For the first time, he didn't look certain. He looked afraid. And that was the twist Clara had planned all along. Not money, not power, truth. And truth doesn't bend to rage. Ethan stood frozen, his face drained of color, as though the foundation beneath his entire life had cracked open. His lips parted, but no words came. He looked at me, not as a son looks at a father, but as if I were the thief who had robbed him blind. "This isn't finished," he muttered finally, his voice trembling, more boy than man. "I'll fight it. I'll fight all of it." I should have felt triumphant. After years of humiliation, after years of being dismissed as irrelevant, here I was, the man his mother had trusted with everything. But triumph never came. Instead, I felt the weight settle on me, heavier than anything I'd carried in my life. "You can fight the will," I said quietly. "You can burn through lawyers, you can scream fraud, but you won't win. Because this isn't about money. It's about her choice, and her choice is already made." His eyes glistened with fury, and something else, grief he didn't know how to show. He slammed his fist against the desk, scattering papers, and stormed out of the office. The door shut hard behind him, leaving the air shaking. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the letter in my hands. Clara's handwriting, so fierce and steady, looked alive on the page. She had spoken to me from the grave, and every word carried more weight than the millions she had left. "Mr. Walker," Harrison said softly, "I know this is overwhelming, but your wife, your ex-wife, she was deliberate. She believed in you." The word hit harder than any inheritance. Believed. After years of being told I was mediocre, after years of being ignored, Clara had seen me. Even at the end, I walked out of that office into sunlight that felt too bright for the world I'd just left. My old Honda sat between gleaming luxury cars like a joke the universe had written. I slid into the driver's seat, gripped the wheel, and let the truth crash over me. I was no longer invisible. But recognition came with responsibility. $32 million, a controlling stake in Walker Dynamics. Power I had never wanted, never asked for. I could feel it pressing against me, daring me to use it wrong, daring me to become the man Clara once accused me of not being. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, the same scarred table Ethan had once dented with his toy truck, Clara's letter beside me. I read it over and over, until the words burned into me. "I trust you because you never wanted it. Use it not as power, but as responsibility." At dawn, I knew what I had to do. I didn't want mansions or yachts. I didn't want to strut through the world proving I had won. What I wanted, what Clara had finally handed me, was a chance to turn pain into purpose. I called Harrison that morning. "I want to set up a foundation," I said. "Scholarships for kids like Ethan used to be before we drowned him in expectations. Programs for single parents who are one paycheck away from losing everything. Investments in communities that the company ignored because they weren't profitable enough." There was silence on the line. Then Harrison said, "That's exactly what she hoped you'd say." But Ethan was another matter. Days passed without word from him. When he finally called, his voice was jagged. "You think this makes you a hero?" he spat. "You think running around giving money away will erase what you were? You're still the same failure." "I don't need to be a hero," I said. "I just need to do right with what she gave me." "You didn't earn it," he snapped. "Neither did you," I answered softly. Silence stretched. Then the line went dead. For weeks, I expected him to drag me into court. He didn't. Maybe he knew what I knew, that no legal battle could rewrite Clara's last choice. I still hope he'll come around. I still hope he'll remember the boy at the pool, lost in the middle of a party built for everyone but him. I hope he'll see that Clara's final gift wasn't punishment. It was freedom. Freedom to step out of her shadow and discover who he is without her empire. As for me, I carry her words every day. I keep the letter folded in my wallet, worn at the edges from being read too many times. Whenever doubt creeps in, when the board looks at me like a pretender, when whispers of failure rise again, I pull it out. I never stopped loving you. You deserve every penny. Use it for good. Clara didn't just leave me her fortune. She gave me back my worth. She gave me back the belief that love, even broken love, doesn't vanish. It lingers. It redeems. The world sees $32 million. I see responsibility. I see a second chance to be the man she hoped I could be. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving that her faith was not misplaced. Because in the end, the real inheritance wasn't money. It was dignity. It was forgiveness. It was the reminder that honor still matters, even in a world obsessed with power. Clara's last gift wasn't the fortune she left. It was the chance to prove that justice, respect, and love can outlast even the deepest wounds. And maybe that's the lesson for all of us. No matter how far we fall, we can rise again with grace. No matter how broken a family becomes, the ties of love are never truly severed. They wait for us to choose them again. If this story touched you, let it remind you of your own strength, your own resilience, and the people who shaped you. And if you want more stories like this, about family, sacrifice, and the battles we all fight, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes, the right story at the right moment can change everything.